It's Friday evening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope you're all well. The long-awaited National Trust live show. I was tempted to change the topic at the last second, but Graham stopped me. He's laughing in my ear now. But hey, everyone, thank you for being here. In this live explainer and discussion, we're going to be talking about flying your drone near, around, and over sites controlled by National Trust, explaining the rules that you need to consider and assess before and during your drone flight. However, much of the information that you're going to hear does, of course, also count in terms of other organizations such as English Heritage, etc. This guide will give you the information you need to enable your drone flight around many beautiful sites and locations in England and Wales. So do use it as you see fit. This video will give you our thoughts and guidance on ensuring your flight is as safe as possible, getting you the shots that you want, all the while helping to protect the hobby and the industry of drones in the UK. This video focuses on open category flights, so hobby flying in the open category and legislation currently in force in the UK. This rule explainer videos, these rule explainer videos always sound a little bit harsh because, of course, we are taking the view of what if something goes wrong, etc. So do please not be put off getting out there and flying your drone responsibly. Many of the issues we're discussing are, yes, they happen every day, but obviously to an individual drone flyer, they are probably a rarity, or I hope they are. If not, you might be doing something wrong, I would potentially suggest. You can easily keep all of the following advice in mind and get the shots that you want at the stunning locations offered by National Trust and others. So if you've got any questions, please do tag at Geeksvana if you can in the chat, because it helps it come through, and we will come to those as we go through the show and also towards the end as well. So let's bring Graham in and get into the fun and games of these particular topics. I'm leaving him because he's waving. I'm going to leave him a little bit longer, a little bit. There he is.
It's Friday night.
Were you about to run out of energy
then? End of the week. I never run out of energy.
We're liking the shirt tonight. Are those drones?
Birds. It's the hummingbirds.
Yes, but there isn't anything. Birds don't exist. They're drones.
There is that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My cable is actually ridden up my back. Let me just sort that very, very quickly, because otherwise it will cut off and I won't be able to hear you. There we go.
We don't want that.
No, we want
lovely.
We want the host to be comfortable. Surely, people.
We do.
Yes. Right. So we're talking about National Trust this evening. So I have to say we're both feeling a little bit cheeky after a very long and tiring week. So if I do say things like our advice is don't fly there, ha ha ha. You have to excuse the dad jokes, etc., because it has been a very long week, hasn't it, Graham?
It has. Yes. It has, yes. But if I tell people I've done an ISO 9001 audit on a manufacturing site this week, they might begin to understand, or not.
Yes, and factor into that we are currently dealing with one of the largest stories in the channel's history. And I'm not talking about drone sightings or New Jersey or the USAF. That's been interesting, fun on some levels, very concerning on other levels, but actually we're not talking about that, but we're talking about something else that we're working on at the moment, which is seismic, frankly, and one of the as I say, the biggest thing we've been working on, and that has taken up a lot of time, so apologies that this particular show has been pushed around a bit because of that as well, but yes. Now
we're there.
Indeed, yes. One of the first things I wanted to stress in terms of National Trust flights, etc., is that you need a closer focus on the rules. Really, now, what does that actually mean? These locations have people, historic buildings, car parks, animals, and other potential issues that you're going to need to navigate. So you should expect that your actions will potentially be under more scrutiny and subject to what I call the snowball effect, more than many flights that you take. An issue that is much more likely to basically create a reaction. You know, if you were to clip a tree in the middle of nowhere, or even really, in the middle of a town or something, somebody may notice it, etc. Fine. If you have an incident within the National Trust or other managed sites managed by other organizations, then it's more likely to get a reaction. There's more likely to be some kind of damage there that's going to cost money, or of course the fact that you've got to then go and get a drone back from someone that doesn't want you flying your drone.
And the tree will have belonged to Henry VIII.
That's it. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Henry VIII will have,
and he will haunt you.
So the apple would have hit Henry VIII on the head, and he would have said "Eureka" under the tree. How many people have I just triggered? How many people, including my co-host, have I just triggered?
You're feeling uncomfortable yourself.
I know. For the rest of the show, I'm going to feel like I need to explain the yes, but I'm going to move on. So yes. Now, as an assist point, we've put something in the description which will help people. I think it will help people with this particular topic as well. There is a map overlay, which will actually show you the entirety of the UK, but it will basically give you what the boundaries are in terms of each of the National Trust sites. Now, this can be useful not only, of course, to know if you're on National Trust land, because there are actually some sites that, in terms of how they're managed, can be slightly different, and these do have the different color codings, etc. So get to know this map quite well. But of course, if you wanted to go along and get this part of Ashridge Park and Thunderdale Lodge. Now, I don't know what the restrictions are. I'm literally picking a location completely at random. I don't even know that. Have you ever heard of that one, Graham? I've never heard of that personally.
Don't know that one.
Now, of course, it does show you that actually there's a few roads and a few bits and pieces here, and actually is there going to be a more suitable takeoff position outside of it. So it's a really handy map, and it is linked in the description right now, rather than me linking it afterwards and not actually doing it. So yes, it's actually in the description right now. So that's a bit of an assist. Now, do use it as a guide, because of course any overlay onto maps can have a little bit of difficulty. So I wouldn't sort of try standing, to any auditors watching, I probably wouldn't stand 1 millimeter outside that shows you and then show them the map and say, here you go.
Yeah.
It's I'm not on your land,
if the boundary is a road, it may be either side of the road, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
It should be accurate, but
exactly. Exactly. Now, one of the other, really, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most important parts in terms of when you're flying in locations where there could be people, buildings, that type of thing, is actually that good old catch-all one. And I haven't actually mentioned this on the channel too much recently. It came up last night briefly, but it used to be something, especially when we were changing the rules across to the adopted EU EASA, whatever you want to call them. Article 241 of the Air Navigation Order, which is the endangering and safety of any person or property. And that obviously reads that a person must not recklessly or negligently cause or permit an aircraft to endanger any person or property. Now, this is an absolute catch-all. You could be flying in with everything else going exactly correctly within 400 feet, within visual line of sight, X, Y, Z, but actually you haven't assessed the flight correctly, or something happens, it could then trigger this catch-all. Article 241. It's an important sort of cornerstone of drone use, isn't it, Graham?
It is. Yeah, and it's next to 240, which doesn't apply to drones, which is to do with endangerment.
It doesn't protect drones, but we have to follow 240. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes, we must not endanger aircraft, but we are not an aircraft that mustn't be endangered.
Yes,
so to speak.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a little bit, and does it helps fuel that, oh my god, everybody is against us sort of attitude and feeling. And it is a catch-all, as you say. We used to think, oh, that's a pretty high bar to be found to be reckless or negligent, but I think when something goes wrong, that's where they'll look to, because if it's gone wrong, they'll say, have you risk assessed it properly? Why did it go wrong?
Yes, and if you look at, there was the flight with the chap near the Hurricane. Was it Hurricane? It was a Hurricane, wasn't it? And Hurricane, other flights, whereas as Graham was saying, the bar, and actually I think the bar, it was previously felt the bar was perhaps a bit too high to get drones under Article 241. It was always a threat, but actually now we are seeing prosecutions. In more recent times. So it is something that, as I was saying, the snowball effect. So they find that you're not registered. They find that you were flying beyond visual line of sight. You've hit a historic building and caused X £100,000, X £1 million of damage. Of course,
so they can just throw this one in there, can't they?
Yeah, and this actually becomes the overall more serious situation, because it is they don't have to say you were flying at 412 feet or this or that. They just basically have to say that you were you are operating contrary to a person must not recklessly or negligently cause or permit an aircraft to endanger any person or property. So they don't, and of course, if you've damaged property, if your drones hit someone or something like that, then of course you are beyond that point of endangering and you've crossed into it. So I would say, yeah, it's an important one to stress, because I get a lot of people saying, and I actually even get people who will email me and say, oh, I was all within the rules and I still stopped by the police for doing X, Y, and Z, or something else happened, and actually Article 241 is sometimes the thing that comes up. So it is very, very important just to keep in mind. I won't stress that too much, but I will as well. So it's my show. It's my party. Now, one of the other the next topic, as it were, for this part is that in terms of understanding the issues that are surrounding drone use around national trust and around other sites that are managed by historic associations, organizations, etc. And this is something I feel personally quite passionate about, that we need to try and get along with landowners, and we need to try and get along with them, in my opinion, overall across drone use. This is something that actually people like Graham are already quite used to, because of course within operational authorizations and ops manuals, etc., they already have quite a high bar in terms of having actual written permission to be able to take off from where they're taking off from in terms of their flight. That's not something we have in the open category, and I think people can get a bit flippant about it. And there's lots of videos asserting rights over national trust or similar staff and that type of thing. And as much as it's interesting in terms of, actually, yes, you're showing the privileges that we have as drone users, and yeah, there's an interesting aspect to that. To me, it has a lot of danger as well, because in the long run, confrontation with landowners will lead to more restrictions. It's 110%. There are not enough drone users to combat obviously the landowners of the nation, particularly commercial landowners. If they all turned around and basically wrote to their MPs and said, this is happening, it needs to stop because of X, Y, Z, restrictions will come. So we need, in my personal opinion, we do need to be really, really careful in terms of that. And to have a confrontation issue over land rights, as I say, it will, in my opinion, kick up more rules. Now, because
landowners tend to be powerful people and very powerful lobbies, and the drone lobby is like, well, trying to get them to do anything as one is like herding cats.
Yes.
So we don't have the power in this situation generally.
And you only have to look at the recent CAA RPAS consultation in terms of changing things from 2026, although it's doubtful that's going to happen within that time scale at the moment. But you've only got to look at that to see actually some of the, and I don't want to label it auditing, but certainly some of the disagreements and issues that landowners have already started to pop up in there, in terms of they're talking about flights over private land, etc., and these things need to be addressed. So it's really important that, in my opinion, that we look at the fact that we actually do have a lot of freedoms with our drones in the UK.
We have.
And they should be protected, and we should work with people. It's a society. It's not just I can do this, screw you all, basically. It isn't that is not the way to be able to do this. And frankly, it isn't good airmanship.
We don't want to find ourselves going down the French route, which is you do not fly over private property without permission. Any private property, a bit of farmland, sorry, somebody owns it, you can't fly over it.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
we do not want to go down that route.
Yes, because again, if you were to ask that, I mean, look at the hysteria over drone sightings at the moment, and if people actually realize,
or aircraft sightings, whatever.
In my opinion, if the vast non-drone using public realized, even in the UK, that anyone with a drone can fly straight over their private land at the moment, I think there would actually be more of a fuss kicked up about it. But personally, that's just my opinion in terms of where I think the public would go, especially in terms of when you look at the way that things have actually happened over these sightings and other issues that happen. It isn't a good view that people end up with drones, frankly. So to me, it also seems a slight oddity, because when I fly at National Trust locations and similar, it's actually something where I would be surprised half the time, actually, if the staff and visitors even knew I'd flown my drone there, especially if I'm taking like a Mini 3, Mini 4 there, or even really the Air 3. because I don't feel like I need to get particularly close to get some stunning footage and some wonderful shots. In actual fact, as I say, I would personally be quite surprised if people even know they were there, because getting up too up close to things, I just don't think it's that interesting, if that makes sense.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. No, that wide view we've got with those lenses, where we can get a lovely landscape. And a lot of this stuff is especially the National Trust sites are based around the landscape.
Yes.
And if you want to collect a lot of the landscape, then you need to be a little bit further away.
No, exactly. Can I just say, in the chat, we've got a few people having a pop at each other. If you can't, as with ever with this channel, and we have everybody from the police. Last night we had a defence barrister on, etc. We have every aspect of the drone use here, because we want to have that conversation with everybody. But please do attempt, where possible, to be kind to each other. Basically, we don't have to love each other or even agree with each other, but if we need to have these conversations openly. And thank you, Tadzi, and other moderators who are reacting to that in the chat. If you're attacking anybody personally, it won't stand. Basically, it's as simple as that. So just a very quick one on that. Now, as much as I feel like we have a responsibility as a hobby, and it's something I'm fairly passionate about, we're extremely passionate about, in terms of, I think that we should look after our fellow members of society as landowners, etc., and bring them on side and explain it to them. Because actually, if we had a better relationship, we could have people like the National Trust on this channel, and they could discuss what's happening. We've got shows coming up in January where we have triple SI managers coming on to talk about their fears and that type of thing, and to discuss responsible drone use and how to open up as much airspace, and how to read triple SI restrictions properly, etc. It's because that is a only slightly less controversial topic. But and of course, you don't have auditors and other people turning up and basically trying to fly a drone around penguins. Yeah. You don't have the moss going, so you don't have that reaction. But
wandering around, we're all wandering around for half a day looking for the ranger. Please.
That's it, exactly. But defending our use of the airspace is extremely important as well, of course, and we need to defend that airspace as hobby users. But really preventing landowners from deciding that we're all a nuisance is an important thing to do through that. And I think that there is more work needed, and this is one of the areas where I think that the CAA have particularly failed in terms of most of their output is just about using your drone legally and safely and following the drone code and drone. Yeah, great. How about letting the public know that actually that guy flying his drone over my house is perfectly legal, and is probably doing something nothing to do with my house, and is doing something to do with the beautiful manor house behind, or he could be doing a roof survey, or the millions of other things. We need more public explanation that we're not spying on everyone, and we're not trying to
explanation and defense of the hobby.
Yeah, exactly. And indeed general drone use, frankly. So it's something that which I feel like we're just not getting in the UK. As much as channels like ours and other channels try to promote positive drone use, it's obviously not going to be as serious as something like the CAA putting out a campaign, and they do it with other forms of air travel. They have adverts saying how safe air travel is, that if you go via atoll protected, you're okay. So why not have that warm fuzzy language around drone use a little bit more, in terms of bringing the public on side? Because of course, as they would hope, because it's partially beneficial to their future as well, drone use is going to become more and more commonplace, basically. So I think it's really important, because the spying on thing is, even in all of these New Jersey and USAF drone sightings, etc., a good 30% of comments on my videos and other videos that I've been watching on the topic, and even posts, are people concerned about what they can see in their garden and in their house. And I understand that. I actually don't think it's necessarily irrational to be irrational over something you have no understanding of. And I would hope that the National Airspace Regulator and others would, who want the lower airspace to succeed, we're told, would do more to be able to promote that, frankly. It's something I think would be quite important, personally. So up next, I want to talk about the rules themselves and actually a clarification around that side of things. And it's really, this is obviously normal open category rules that apply over any land. You obviously have to work out whether or not that location is in a congested area. So that you then start to get the restrictions on weight. So if it's over 250, you start to need to think about an A2 CFC, etc., that kind of thing. It's also interesting. The National Trust and others will push the drone code forward in terms of, and indeed on their policy, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes on their page, they bring up the CAA drone code. And of course, in last night's show, we were talking about quite heavily, weren't we, Graham, about the fact that the drone code isn't necessarily legislation. So it's a little bit, it becomes a little bit difficult from that point of view, because the CAA's drone code description of what congested is, and it's much tighter than I would argue legislation and
Yes.
reasonable interpretation of legislation, because they even see, because it would need to be a town or a village, and then it came down to being a row of houses could be congested, and now it's almost a single building.
They do want to change it to a structure.
Yeah.
I mean, that may not even be a structure that's being used by anybody. It could be because again,
you don't know.
Very poorly defined.
Yeah, that's right.
And a ridiculous definition of congested.
Yes.
One car on the road is not congestion on the road.
No, exactly. And it's worth bearing in mind that should anything happen here, in terms of criminal, obviously it is going to be the legislation. So, but just keep that in mind in terms of the location that you're flying at, because I think some people forget they're flying at a castle and it's on the edge of a reasonable sized conurbation, and they forget that actually means that it's now congested, and they whack the Mavic 3 up or the Air 3 up without the right the right separation, and go flying straight over it, basically. And yes, forgetting the 150 and the 50 meter separation, which is ironic, of course, because you then go into the A3 category, and legislation wise, you no longer have a stipulation in terms of uninvolved people distance. Yes, it's incredible, isn't it, basically? But there we go.
It really is, unless you're flying for the drone code, of course, and we're tied in the we're in the Gordian
unless you
knot
choose
of
that
regulations stroke laws.
Yeah, indeed.
Can I just throw in something on bylaws? And I know this will come up with the National Trust bylaw, but in general bylaws, somebody sort of commented on a post earlier today saying, well, it's easy. National Trust have got a bylaw, so you can't fly over their land because there's a bylaw, and we'll come on to that. And was pointing at the drone code to say the drone code's just got one line, and that makes it easy. But actually, even in the drone code, it only says where you can and can't fly from, or where you can fly and where you can fly from. It's not actually restricting necessarily airspace.
No. Well, it's interesting actually, because I am going to come on to that, because there is when the National Trust say in their new policy that you can't fly over their land due to that bylaw, they mean something else, and they're technically correct. Controversial, because this is the myth busting episode, but I will come on to that, and it's all about wording, and it's fairly clever wording, because I think it will defeat a number of new drone flyers, particularly, who will read it and think, "Oh, I'm not going anywhere near that." So it obviously has its impact, as it were.
And I think I know where you're coming from.
Yes, indeed. So again, in terms of the basic rules, if the airspace restrictions are clear and you have the correct drone and certification, then there is nothing to stop you with safe, responsible overflights. And actually, you may think, well, as long as I'm under 400 feet, it's safe and responsible. No, you do need to ensure that you are not interfering with the people on the ground, etc., or causing any kind of endangerment from that point of view, as per Article 241. So it's not quite as simple as that, especially when you start getting into these areas, but we'll come on to that. We do obviously have, as regulars know, we have general drone rule videos with on the channel in terms of a deeper dive for that kind of side of things. So do go into our UK drone rule series playlist for more of those videos, because I don't want to go through every single rule in terms of 400 feet and different airspaces, etc. We're here for very specific reasons today. So perhaps if you are very, very new, go and watch those and then come back and watch this one afterwards, basically. One of the areas that I think is interesting in terms of national trust, and is the next short topic point, is groups of people. Because obviously in terms of the A1 flight with a sub 250 gram drone, which going by the sales and going by surveys of places like Grey Arrows and that type of thing, it's certainly sub 250. It really is the most popular camera drone space for the hobby. You need to be aware of definitions around flying over groups of people. And if anyone basically cannot get out of the way quickly, then you should not be flying over them. And it's something that you could come a cropper with, and it's something, especially around national trust properties, etc., you need to be really, really aware of, because even fairly quiet locations can actually fall foul of this. So take assessment before you fly, but of course also closely monitor the situation during your flight, as of course that can change. Now, to me, how about you, Graham? To me, a group of people, I think the definition is an interesting one, because it does have some backup in legislation. And it's one of those ones where I think I wouldn't be surprised if courts would actually take almost, drone codey type descriptions for this, explanations for this kind of this side of things. Because obviously they say it's anybody that can't get out of the way. I mean, is that a group of people having a picnic? Is it people queuing to get into a national trust property, or is it an infamous bridge in Bristol?
So my view when I'm risk assessing is that thing of, can people get out of the way? Now, to me, the whole concept is completely flawed, because if I'm flying at 400 feet over some people who aren't spaced, who have got a fair amount of space, they could all move out of the way, but they don't know there's a drone flying above them and it's nighttime and it's a fairground, then actually when that drone comes down, there's a fair chance it might hit somebody who could have moved out of the way but didn't, because he didn't know there was a drone there and it was coming down without its motors on, because it's flipped and switched itself off. So I do it from a risk assessment point of view, and I wouldn't fly over those people who don't constitute an assembly of people, but to me constitute people at risk from my drone should the worst happen.
Exactly.
And you've got to think in terms of, does the worst happen? Every time I fly my drones, I assume that they're going to fall out of the sky. They haven't yet, and there's no wood around here to touch. Oh, there is. There's Spike. So Spike's got a woody little trunk on him, so to speak.
I'm clipping that later.
YouTube ban. So it's about a risk assessment. People may be on the beach and they could be fairly widely spaced, but they're laying down sunbathing. They're not going to get out of the way. So even if they know the drone's there, they're not going to be able to get out of the way quickly. Yeah. So again, I'd assess that and think, okay, I'll find a route where there aren't people. And then finally, it's not just about being over them. It can be about traveling towards them. So if you know there's a crowd there, you're traveling towards it at 400 feet at speed, you lose power, you can be 50, 60 meters away, and that drones will still go in and fall into that crowd. Yes. And you will have been classed as overflying them.
Yes, and
whether you feel that's fair or not.
Exactly, and trust me, in court, especially in the civil courts, etc., as well, which you could easily find yourself in with these situations. The fact that the landowner is famously known within the community and publishes the fact that they do not want drone use there will become a factor in all of that, which is why we're saying that it feels a little bit more aggressive this evening in terms of the warnings from that side of things, but that's because it genuinely is something there. There's just one very quick comment that I want to answer, which actually, hang on one second, I'm not actually getting my comments up, bear with me. I will just fix this very quickly.
I'll just fly back to that scenario where I'm potentially flying towards a group and there's a failure. I'm going to change my strategy. I'm going to do a strafing shot. I'm going to go sideways and get whatever shot I want that way.
Yeah.
So there's usually an answer.
That's right. Exactly.
Just get great. Or move backwards.
So Chris Dolby is asking if there's an open field owned by National Trust, it's completely open. A public road runs alongside it. Can I legally fly my Vata 2 over the land from the road? BDFA, yes. Basically, absolutely. If you are taking off from land that you know is not controlled or owned by them, then yes, you can. I mean, you know, in terms of, you know, legally, I wouldn't necessarily. Yes, I would make that flight. Obviously, legally depends on airspace and all the other things. And sorry, Chris, I know as a channel member, you know all about all those things, but I do have to caveat it that it's not an open invitation for someone.
It's the caveat show.
I'm just trying to think if there's national trust within the FRZ of Heathrow and someone then posting, I got arrested after following Geeksvana's advice.
But Sean said.
Yeah, that's right. Can you imagine that? So yes, in that scenario, absolutely crack on. And again, obviously, you just need to be careful in terms of anybody that could come into the field and that type of thing. If you're flying an Avata 2 and from the point of view of height and that type of thing. But yes, I know the scenario you're talking about, Chris, and yes, you're absolutely fine from that point of view. Just wanted to pick that up because the open space side of things is very important. And actually, in actual fact, this map that we brought up earlier, Chris, can actually be something that's hugely beneficial to FPV flyers because it can show you you know, locations where actually, you know, if this is public land over here above this bit, and actually I want to fly over this field, again, I've got no idea what's here. It could be a prison. I have no idea. This is literally just a map of this overlay. Then, you know, there's nothing wrong with that flight, etc. So yes, I understand where you're coming from, and without my heavy caveats, absolutely. Because
can I just say, if I ever get locked up in a National Trust prison, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? It'd be molten brown soap, and it would be
do you think they'd lock you in the cafe or something?
Imagine the flapjacks.
Is that why the cafe closes before the rest of the venue does? Because that's where they put the naughty drone flyers. Now, obviously, one of the next small topic on this is takeoff, and this is obviously a key problem, and to me is one of the biggest factors in terms of, as a landowner, forget about, and I'm not talking about too much in terms of the National Trust bylaw and other bylaws of landowners, etc., because obviously that is it to me is not connected to this, because you're already not going to be taking off from their land, so it becomes a non-problem. But takeoff really is the key situation in terms of where you can take off, etc. And of course, it is the absolute basics of a landowner that if they don't want you to take off from their land, then they've got as much right to stop you doing that as they do anything else, basically. You know, if a landowner comes across somebody, you know, I don't know, I was going to say having a picnic, but that would be quite harsh, wouldn't it, depending on the land. But you know, if someone's having a little party, then they can stop you. It's their land, and that's obviously under civil and everything else like that, and you know, triggering criminal should things turn nasty, etc. But you know, National Trust have that right under their management side of things as well. Now, one of the ones that comes up a lot is hand launching, and absolutely, in my opinion, hand launching does not count as being off the land, or launching from a car roof or anything else like that, where it is where the operation is happening. So if your car is parked on their land and you're taking off from the roof of the car, that operation is from their land. If you are stood on top of your car and you jump up in the air as you take off, the operation is still on their land. And that is my 100% opinion, having had that slightly ludicrous conversation with many serious people in the industry, and you know, legally, enforcement, everything else wise, lots of conversations.
Same here, because actually, you know, is the whole thing of jump. Why do I need to jump? Because actually I'm not on their land, my shoes are. I didn't break into your house, my shoes did, right, and my gloves did. That wasn't me.
It wasn't me, Gov. So you know, it is important to take off from outside of the owned land to obviously avoid that situation. Again, things like that map of boundaries can help you from that point of view. Yeah. Some people, and actually Dan the Drone Man, I noticed in the chat was talking about this, and that's in terms of right of access. And I see this coming up again, and it's been raised to us via email in the run up to this show. The rights of access now. We are getting to a level of minutiae here that is highly unlikely to come up in terms of your drone flight. If you are flying responsibly from a footpath, it is unlikely anybody is going, because frankly, half the time it's unlikely anyone's going to come across you flying from a right of way, etc. But it is important to know that if you are approached and a farmer or someone says, actually, you shouldn't be doing that from here, because actually many rights of way do have no loiter policies, clauses, and they also have clauses that stop you doing things like having picnics and basically running activities. They are a right of way from point A to point
Yeah,
B on a
exactly.
very specific line.
Then they're not publicly owned. They are owned by the landowner on whose land they run across.
Yes.
Generally speaking, 99% of the time. And you know, if that person doesn't want you to fly from their land, just please respect that. It's the right thing to do as a human
That's
being,
it.
apart from anything
Yeah,
else. But you
exactly.
wouldn't expect them to come into your garden. I know, oh yeah, but oh, it's not a right of way. Okay, I'll come into your driveway because you let the postman there, and I'm going to fly off your driveway. Why
Yeah.
not? Because you don't want them to do it.
No,
So
exactly.
just
Exactly.
don't. And fun if I've got a really friendly farmer who I go and use. In fact, we flew there. We did the 1,000 foot flight
Oh
there,
yes,
Sean.
yes.
The guy there is absolutely sound. The moment I got into drones, he said, "Yeah, come and fly on my land." He's got sheep there. He's got cows there. He doesn't mind. He's absolutely wonderful. He doesn't like mountain bikes. Now I'm a mountain biker as well, and I wanted to get mountain bikes. And there's a path, a path that comes down. It's a footpath down through his land. And look, could I just get a couple of mates on mountain bikes and come down? He said, no, no, you can't. I don't want bikes down there. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
exactly.
I've never pushed it. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
tried it. That's what he doesn't want me to do that. That's
And actually,
absolutely
this
fine.
particular topic is something that Matt Williams got a lot of stick for making a video on, back when he did his reg videos, in terms of the right of access, etc. But it is true. And you know, someone asked us a question, as they have done. We've seen this talked about in terms of, I was okay because I was on a right of access across a farmer's land. He can't stop me flying my drone. Actually, you do need to check that right of way in terms of the wording, because sometimes it can. Now, I've highlighted Phantom and the drones comment for far too long, but it's because it's probably the most British comment I've seen on this channel. So thank you, sir, for bringing some
Yes,
some sensible humour back to the channel after all
tip
of
the
that.
hat to that one.
Indeed, that has to be one of the most British jokes I've ever heard. And every American reviewer is now going, "What does this mean?" And please don't Google. Please do not Google
Don't
that.
Google it.
Yeah. Just know it takes you to a side of the internet you don't probably don't want to go to. But hey, live and let live.
Take your source.
Yeah.
It's a
Should we
hobby.
get off that?
Let's.
It's a hobby, yes. Apparently, yes. Right, line of sight issues is next, and keeping your drone inside the law, as I've said previously, in these type of locations where you're perhaps potentially under more scrutiny, and certainly your flight afterwards could be under more scrutiny. And there's lots of ways they can tell what happened with your flight that you may not even be aware of. Frankly, more on that in 2025. If things go wrong, you're going to be under a lot more scrutiny in this type of location, particularly because the person has publicly said they don't want you flying there. Legislation for line of sight, remember, requires avoiding collisions not only in the air, so it's not helicopters and other drones and everything else like that, but also on the ground. So you need to be able to assess from your takeoff position what is happening on the ground where your drone is flying. So something like boundary walls of a castle, trees, etc., as of course some of these sites can have incredibly old, large, wonderful trees, could of course complicate that. It doesn't stop you, but it could complicate that. My personal advice on that situation is to consider multiple takeoff positions, to get around that, and to remember that your drone camera does not count in terms of giving you line of sight of the ground. So taking off with your drone, getting over the wall and then pointing the camera down, great idea. I support that, but that does not give you line of sight in terms of the legislation for avoiding collisions on the ground as well, basically. And multiple takeoff positions is something I think is really good. Actually, it can stop fatigue. It can get that other extra shot. You can sometimes take a minute to assess what you've got and say, okay, actually, I haven't really got much. I'm going to go. I'm too close. I'm going to go way further out for this next shot, and actually, you can end up getting a much better rounder footage and pictures of the site. I mean, if you look behind me, it's a bit blurry. But this is Chris from Big Ladder's shot of the Harry Potter aqueduct with the train going over. He very kindly sent us this. He's selling limited edition prints of this, and he sent us a beautiful one, which we framed and put on the wall here. There's a description, there's a link to it in our description where you can buy one. And that shot is with a Mavic 3 Pro, I believe. But very much very far away from it, taking in lots of landscape, as you can blurrily see. I'm pointing it as if people know what it is, but anyway.
I can see the steam.
Yeah,
I can
okay,
see the steam
excellent,
coming.
excellent.
That's what we need.
So if Graham can see it, you guys can see it. I probably should have done that actually, shouldn't I? But because you can see more of it now. So there you go. So actually getting right up close isn't necessarily the only thing you need to focus on. But just to remember that from the point of view of line of sight, it isn't just being able to see your drone over the top of the castle. It's being able to know what's going on around it. And in terms of legislation, don't shoot the messenger. In terms of legislation, that means with your eyes, or your spotter's eyes, who are stood right next to you, basically.
And just another point on the multiple takeoff positions, sort of professionally, when we're planning flights, we like to have an alternative landing spot, an emergency landing spot. And that might be appropriate in this sort of case, where if you get approached by rangers who are a little bit irate,
yes,
then you may not want to be landing where they are. You know, they'll be in your face a little bit. They shouldn't be, because they should be professional, but it could be members of the public who are getting irate. Have somewhere else you can safely put your drone down, or somewhere where you can hover it if you've
really
got plenty of battery.
Yeah, excellent.
Hover it over a tree or over an open field behind you, so that you can sort out any issues and then bring it in safely.
Now, I am going to come back to the chat, and I'm sorry if I'm missing anything that's important, but I need to find a better way of doing that. I've got a massive, like 70-inch, is it 70 or 80? It's a huge inchage TV here for production reasons, which I have the chat on, which is nice and big as well. It used to be a little bit further over so I could actually read it alongside the camera, so I'm missing things, but I apologize. I will change that. But this one's an interesting one, actually. And Jay says, I despise the NT for their anti-drone prejudice, which on wide open landscape sites is completely unjustified in terms of safety or annoyance. I completely agree with that. And that comes back to the question from our member Chris in terms of him flying his Avata over an empty field, etc. I really, that is 100%. I do agree with that, and I think they should have different policies in terms of countryside and property. The only thing I would say is if you're not taking off from it and you're flying over National Trust sites, etc. Obviously, they don't have much power in those terms. I'm not about to say go fly at National Trust sites because there's no property on there and anything else like that. But I'm perhaps also suggesting you might not get your collar felt particularly quickly doing that either. And there's an awful lot of National Trust beautiful landscapes taken by drone on the internet for people that never take off from National Trust. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%. Yes.
Okay, I'm not being too controversial.
Some areas have more rangers than other areas, I would suggest, and I would suggest the ones with the properties will tend to have a lot more rangers.
Yes.
And it's a big old car park there full of cars. They'll have rangers and visitors there, and that's a higher risk. More than that, I shall not say.
No, indeed, exactly. But yes, it is something that, and again, if it does happen, you're going to be asked to land your drone and sod off, I was about to say, or go away.
In which case, do it.
Exactly. If they come across you the third or fourth time that day, it's like, hang on a minute, mate. I went to lunch at 1 o'clock. It's now 2, and you're back.
But Sean said I should have multiple takeoff positions.
Yes. Brilliant. But just be aware of that. Now, because for instance, this line of sight issue isn't necessarily something I think you're going to have a lot of focus on in terms of other flights. So I don't know how much this would be focused on in terms of if you crashed your drone in a town centre or a village centre, are they going to look at any obstructions? However, if someone is analysing your flight for all sorts of reasons and you're stood outside of a very large wall that clearly blocks everything on the other side, that becomes more obvious. And as I say, flying at these sites, the incidents that happen are under more focus than somebody flying their Avata 2 in a field.
It's that scrutiny. The National Trust know everybody in the press that they need to make sure that there's focus on this if anything were to happen. And that would be damaging to the hobby. So you're sort of, when you're out flying, you're responsible to everybody else in the community. Exactly. As you are for yourself, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly. And as I always say in my videos, take that how you may. If you would rather go and have a shouting match with a National Trust manager because you want to tell them that you're flying your drone, that's up to you. But just be aware of what our thoughts are on that. Now, that actually leads us nicely on to inspection of your takeoff location and site inspection of where you're going to be flying over. As your takeoff position obviously won't be on site, it's important to walk the area that you're going to fly to spot hazards like wires and other potential hazards, because of course avoiding an incident is something that is better than obviously covering yourself in case there's an incident. And just a site walk is so important. And I often spot things, a small wire that I think, there's no way my drone camera would have picked that up on my little screen on my, I'm an old man, and on my little screen there, certainly when I'm watching the drone flying through the sky, will I see that tiny wire? No. Will I be paying enough attention to my screen for that to be for that to show? Will it even show on my on the feed? Who knows? But I have seen things that I've sometimes thought, oh, I'm glad I carried on walking down this little lane to see what's down here actually.
Well, I mean, the absolute classic is concentrating on the subject, on the castle or the gardens or whatever it is, and stopping at the side of the road. And at the side of the road, there's quite often a telegraph line going above you, and you haven't even thought about looking up, and up you go, and the first thing that happens is it's the telegraph line. I've got one that goes across my driveway,
Yes.
and I have to check every time. I know where it is, but I'm careful where I place the drone on the driveway.
Exactly. Now we're going to move on to the actual policy itself, and we're going to pop this up on screen. He says famously, I need to put that back to that screen. There you go. So this is the National Trust's current policy. Now, let me take that down for a second. This is a smaller section of this video than you might expect, and that is mainly because the policy doesn't necessarily impact the legislation. Well, it doesn't impact the legislation, but doesn't necessarily impact it. This is informing you as in terms of how they feel about your drone flight, basically. So it's obviously an important one to cover, but it's not the be all and end all of how I think you should fly around National Trust properties. And that's an important point to make. So drone flying by members or the general public. We're not going to talk about the flying by contractors or commercially filming, because that will be people flying under operational authorizations who
they'll have permissions, and that's all.
It's a completely different thing, and you're starting to talk about rights and all of the other stuff basically that's within their commercial rights of imaging, etc., etc. So the National Trust does not usually authorize personal drone flying on its land and or properties in order to preserve the special nature of these places. Now, I don't necessarily, does not usually authorize. Great, that's fine. As an opening line, I'm all right with that, kind of, from the point of view, just letting us know we're not going to authorize you. Okay.
Yeah. It's the same as the dog walking in the park.
Exactly, as we were mentioning last night.
To walk your dog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Try and get your council to give you written permission to walk your dog. I'm so waiting for someone to send me an email, because I've said that 3 or 4 times now, and I'm waiting for them to forward me an email from their council giving them permission to walk their dog, and I'll have to use something else. But I would also congratulate that person. But anyway. In accordance with the UK CAA Civil Aviation Authority Drone Code 2024, which
that's what I'll be quoting, that legislation there.
Indeed, heavy legislation there, which states that bylaws can restrict drone flight. The National Trust bylaws, constituted by Acts of Parliament, clearly expresses that an authorised person shall not operate an airborne vehicle or machine over National Trust property. Now, they have worded that in a particular way, which actually comes on to the next paragraph, because really what they're talking about there is, and I'll read the next paragraph and I'll come back to why this has some kind of impetus. So in addition, any unauthorized use of a drone, either flown over or from relevant land, may constitute a trespass, or nuisance or harassment, depending on how it is flown and the impact of the use. These are civil claims, which again is good. They put that in there these days, which landowners, including the National Trust and or other affected parties, may bring, and which fall outside the CAA guidance. Now, these 2 paragraphs are worded in such a way to obviously say, the drone code helps us and we have a bylaw, and, I don't necessarily rate the strength of that bylaw. And of course, it's irrelevant from our advice, because we're telling you to take off outside of their land. So it's irrelevant. Do not take off on their land, or you could be subject to an argument about this and getting one of their little fines. That could happen. However, there has been an injunction granted in the north of England. Is it the North or Midlands? Manchester, is that?
Oh,
I got
I'm
in
from the
trouble for
Midlands.
calling
I'm from
Sheffield
the
the
Midlands.
Midlands.
I'm from the Midlands, so I'm going to call it the North.
Okay, cool. Because I got on my video where I mentioned that I got more comments about Sheffield than actually most other things as far as topic count goes. There has been a location which has been basically used by urbexers an awful lot. I love urbexing. Probably 40-50% of my Facebook feed is urbex groups and urbexing friends. It's fantastic, and that is obviously the urban exploring of locations which are empty and have fallen into disrepair. Very much the my sort of interest in it is the Chernobyl style freeze frame from history type of thing, if that makes sense. So I love to see the albums of work that people publish where they've gone into a property that just hasn't touched, but it, you know, literally people were there one day and for whatever reason left or whatever else happened the following day, and it looks like a shot in time covered in dust. I love that kind of photography. I think it's incredible. And urbexers were using a particular location and they were flying their drones over it, but they weren't flying their drones over it. They were flying their drones in a way that could be deemed to be a nuisance. So they were bringing FPV drones down into it and flying through it. They were also bringing camera drones very low to obviously get the shots. It's an empty property. What's the harm, etc. Well, the company that manages the land did actually manage to gain an injunction to stop that and to basically deem that those flights are trespass through the courts, obviously civil action. So that doesn't change things yet in terms of the grander picture. It could have some impact on it, and Richard mentioned it briefly last night. It is significant, but of course, you know, that would be for them to use this in their policy. You would need to see Mini threes buzzing people whilst they're sipping their tea in the outside cafe, wouldn't you? Basically, this isn't normal, responsible drone flight at a good height.
No, and I think if somebody was doing that, I would support charges against them. You know, it's endangerment. Endangerment doesn't mean you have to damage something. You are endangering it. So
that's it, exactly. So that really is those.
It is a different thing, and it seems strange in the urbex one because it's an empty property.
Yes,
but it is still a property, and somebody owns that airspace. And at that point, it's not the CAA; it is the person who owns the property.
That's right.
And it's, you know, it's
who
just
has a responsibility to manage and secure the site, and so they're
absolutely
they're trying to discourage people going on there, and for safety reasons and other reasons. And you know, it's a whole bit of a cluster bleep, but you know, they have their reasons. Obviously, the court is there to decide whether or not those reasons are reasonable and justified.
Yeah,
and that's literally what the court is there for. So yeah, it is one of those types of situations. Basically, this, in my opinion, I think this is very cleverly worded, and I understand exactly what they're saying. As somebody who understands drone legislation and a little bit of the just standard legislation, I congratulate them for their wording. However, I don't think it's reasonable to have fairly complex wording in something that you want most people to understand. And I still feel like it's fairly aggressively worded to try and scare off anybody without any kind of experience in reading those type of things.
I almost feel they should have started with this bit that it goes on to the reasons why they don't want you doing it.
Yes,
and you know, when people understand
this
why,
this is a drone policy that obviously has been approved by legal, and you may even find that was the way around that it started, and actually legal said, can we just put this up the top here just so that, you know, people's attention are drawn to this first, and actually probably, you know, X% of new flyers won't go beyond these paragraphs. They won't need to, because they'll already be put off, basically. They do obviously explain the reasons, and you know, I don't object to any of those reasons as to why they would want responsible flight, and that they have an obligation to maintain safe environment, all of those kind of things, and that they're homes of tenants or historic families. I love that. And drone use could cause an infringement on their privacy. Completely agree with all of these things. All of these things. And you know, restrictions may be imposed for security purposes. It's interesting that they go back to that when up here they're talking about things that are outside of CAA control, because of course, you know, any restriction that we would put on would either, I presume, be a prohibited place or an airspace restriction to stop drone users.
I think
Yeah,
what they're saying there is they don't want people to see routes in, routes out, stuff that's worth nicking, that sort of thing. It's the
yeah,
farmer
no, fair
approaches,
enough. Yeah.
please don't suss out what
No,
equipment
exactly.
we've got
And
there.
then of course it goes on to the rest of it. So certainly in terms of previous policies, this is better than their original one that was up on the website for many years. It's not as, in my opinion, accurate in simple terms. It's accurate, but it's not accurate in simple terms, in simple terms of overflight, etc. As the one that this replaced. I have a video from earlier this year, from the beginning of this year, where they updated their policy, and that one to me actually felt a lot more accurate. And of course, via Freedom of Information responses, they have also confirmed that under CAA regulations, they understand they cannot stop overflight. So they're very, very aware of that. Hence, they worded it this way to say, actually, we think we might be able to stop overflight in other ways. But keep in mind, these are civil cases, and it would again take them the time, the effort, and the money to go and get an injunction, etc.
And it would be location specific
Yeah.
and incident specific.
Yeah. So do not be put off or afraid by that at the moment, at least by that one incident, because there were very, very specific reasons that happened. But yes, this is a. It feels like a baseball bat when actually it's a little bit more of a stern talking to, frankly, when you break it down in terms of what actual power it has as such. And of course, your drone should not be flying low or causing an issue for people that are using the land. And, in my opinion, that really should be an obvious one. Now, the next topic within their policy, which actually I think has an impact, and it's something I'm researching directly with a couple of insurers as well to try and get some answers on, but insurance. Now, you might think that you have that all covered. Either you're a BMFA flyer, FPV UK flyer, or you have your own insurance with wonderful people like Moonrock and Cover Drone. Am I forgetting anyone, Graham, that we should mention there?
I think you've probably got on BMFA,
those two awesome companies. There isn't even an advert because everyone's heard of Moonrock and Cover Drone, frankly, both very, very good companies. So you might think you've got that all covered, but then sit back and tell your insurance company that you're flying over land and property where the owner does not want you to fly and publicly states it, then add the value of the property that you're potentially flying over as well, the potential damage, etc., that the property owner would argue, not that I'm arguing, could happen there. And it might actually be a different thing. It's a little bit like, if you've got a little, I've got a Mini as a Mini Clubman van thing as a channel car, which there'll be more on the channel about that next year. It has Starlink in it. It's branded up, etc. It's a fun little vehicle for our live streaming business. We're going to use that as a channel car as well to go on the road doing live streams. But on a Mini group, somebody wanted to put a little spoiler on the back of their Mini. And they told their insurer, and the insurer basically put their insurance up by about £1,500. You would be surprised why I'm giving you long stories about minis. What subtle differences and what subtle changes, and I would argue this isn't really a subtle difference, can actually impact your insurance. Just because you have insurance doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. So just bear that in mind as well, in terms of, as I say, with the site inspections, line of sight, and all the other types of things, of just keeping things as safe as possible in terms of you and your financial safety, etc., as well. Not just the safety of the wonderful people on the ground, of course. You sound like you're about to say something on that.
No. I think you got it covered there, sir.
Thank you, sir. Right, Article 16, a really quick one on this, because I've had a few emails on this, and I get a few emails a year, generally anyway, asking if Article 16 authorization, which obviously is part of the BMFA and FPV UK, is appropriate for flights at these types of locations. My view is, if it's one of the National Trust sites with a building, etc., that type of thing, well, you can kind of argue, because we're not talking takeoff, so we get a little bit technical. I do not believe that combined with the Article 16 authorization itself, combined with the organization's handbooks, that you should be using Article 16 to fly at National Trust properties in particular, I will say. That would obviously need to be tested, and it's probably something that someone like Simon Dale at FPV UK could give a really definitive answer on, which is one of the things I've got a list of things with Simon at the moment that I will reach out to him soon on. But my personal opinion is, I, as someone who is able to fly under Article 16 due to my memberships, I would not use Article 16 to get that 30-meter bubble, etc., to fly over a National Trust property. I do not believe personally it fits within the appropriate side.
I don't think it does. And if you sort of think about it, you're not flying. Yeah, it's you. Even if you could argue that the National Trust site was a recreational area, it's one where you've been told not to fly, and you're taking off from outside it, possibly on the road outside, but that's not a recreational area.
Yeah, although of course it only has to be, it's in A3, it's any location. It only has to be an area primarily used for recreation. Yeah,
I'm new to FPV.
Yeah, no,
UK.
indeed. No. It's one that's it's an important.
It's that overflight of an area that they don't want you to overfly, and you're not allowed to leave the area.
Yes, the volume. Yes, that's right. So even if you have a park next to a National Trust site, you have to stay within the volume of the park. Again, congested areas, rather than going across across over the National Trust property, etc. But
so it doesn't get you in there, does it?
Because no, that's right. And you also have to bear in mind, it isn't just the authorization, the Article 16 authorization, which is wonderful, an incredible document. You also have to go by the organization's handbook. And their guidelines as well, basically, and combining those two, I find it difficult to see how that can happen, basically. But I may be proved wrong in the future, because that's, as I say, that one in particular is definitely an opinion piece for me. So in terms of how I do it, in terms of how I fly at National Trust sites, I fly and I take off from outside the grounds. I keep a good line of sight of the ground and the air. You do not need to be over, in my opinion, or even particularly close to get stunning footage and shots of a location. Modern drones have decent zooms, and recording at 4K, you can also punch in a fairly decent amount, depending on what you're outputting as in post. So you have that ability as well. I always find flying at a quiet time of day, so early in the morning, getting that mist, getting that sunrise in the UK at the moment. Do we see them?
There is no. It's behind the clouds somewhere.
I got a couple probably 10 days ago. Was probably my really nice cleanest sunrise, I think. But you can get them in the winter here, but certainly early morning, and I would say evening, but that's now late afternoon, frankly, for if it being in daytime is important to you, and obviously therefore you're going to find, especially in the winter months as well, that the location will be quieter, or even potentially, if you're there early in the morning, closed, which can have issues in terms of you need to recover your drone, but obviously in terms of people not being around there and even staff not being around there, etc., it's a really good time of day to do it as well. As I said before, multiple takeoff points. This helps with VLOS and but also ground hazards as well. And most flights at most locations with a small drone, in my opinion, can actually be completed without anybody there knowing that you were even there, frankly. And to me, if you're triggering people coming over and what you're doing, then you're almost doing something wrong in terms of your setup, in my opinion, in terms of planning.
Get it up in the air nice and quickly. They might hear that initial buzz, they'll look around, they won't be able to see it.
That's it.
Because you'll know where it is, because you've seen it go up there. They've got the whole sky to try and find it.
Whereas and then everybody else in the cafe will be recording it and uploading it as a New Jersey drone sighting. Now, one tip, and this is something I used to talk about a lot on the channel in the early years of this channel. Yes, it's been going years, and that is permission flying. I've got some amazing footage and pictures of churches, manor houses, historic sites by just reaching out and asking them. When I'm going to go and visit a location that I want to fly a drone at, especially if it is a church or something, it's something like that, which is actually someone's place of worship. I'm not a religious person myself, by any stretch of the imagination, but actually, I like to have respect in those terms. And I have some of the video on my channel of Europe's oldest mosque, that I flew my drone at twice, and because I had permission, I could go all over the site. I could take off from right outside the mosque doors, etc. It's a beautiful building. And actually, in actual fact, I've visited since for a few of their public open days because I got to know some of the people there. And that's the thing that I'm saying is actually the permission flying side of things, I think, is underrated and can actually open up more opportunities. It isn't all about kicking a door in and saying, I can fly here, screw you. To me, the permission flying, I kind of get a buzz from it from the point of view, and everyone's different, but from the point of view that I get better shots and I get more access. There's also a really old video now, but actually of RAF Barnum, which is a former nuclear site between Lakenheath and Mildenhall. I would like to stress, go and look at the dates on those videos. Graham, stop. I would like to stress.
When you say historic, more than a week?
Yeah, more than 4 years, I think, actually. And I flew my drone there multiple times, looking at the different parts of Richard, the chap who owns the site, that basically was actually reconditioning and using English heritage funding to be able to bring it up to a better standard. And I got some amazing shots and some amazing flights that because of VLOS and just relaxing, I wouldn't have got if I didn't have his permission. Could I have technically taken off from the road? I'm not sure, but literally the two fences, Mildenhall and then just over here is Lakenheath land. So it's right in the middle. And yes, I did get, yes, of course I am in the FRZs, and yes, I did have permission to fly in those FRZs. The RAF were very, and the USAF were very, very forthcoming with those permissions, frankly. So it sounds geeky, doesn't it? It sounds geeky to say get permission, and I'm not saying get National Trust permission because they're not going to give it. But actually, if you are out doing historic locations like churches,
you can be surprised. Yeah, I mean, in my early days, I just a little sort of leaflet landed on the thing. I was reading it over breakfast, and that was when I could afford breakfast. And it mentioned that the local Woodland Trust had opened an education centre. And I thought, well, that would look good from above.
Yes.
So I could have just snuck up there, but I didn't. I pinged them an email and said, can I come and sort of film this thing and get some photos? Oh, yeah, would you? Would you? Yeah, I'll do that. Built up a lovely relationship with them. Then later in the year when I think it was the Orient Express was going through Dorking on the Dorking line, I wanted to take off from Whitedown, which is again, it's one of the linked Woodland Trust that sort of area. Just contacted them. They contacted the local person there. Said, "Yeah, come on down. You can do it." So you're the only person there with an Inspire all ready to take off.
That's right.
To get it to come through.
And obviously, you're going to get the people that just don't answer, or the people that say, "I'd rather you didn't," and that type of thing. And it can bring up issues as much as it can solve. But actually, it genuinely, in my opinion, permission flying can get you some really great shots. It's just an extra thing to add to the thought process there, in terms of that. So having a look at some of the points that people are making, and I need to bring it back to this screen. Sorry, I was all small there. And frankly, we all prefer to look at Graham, don't we? I should maybe leave it on that. But yes, absolutely. It gives us a bad name. We launched from their land. I agree with that. News Now Yorkshire is good to see you as well. Let me actually get this working properly. There we go. Now it's working. Dan the Drone Man, going read about auditors. Rob Taylor. Here in Cornwall, many beaches are National Trust. It is worth knowing that area between low water and high water is owned by the Crown Estate, not the Trust, and not Trust jurisdiction. Yes, low waters, there's a term for it. Come on, Graham.
Foreshore.
Foreshore.
It's the foreshore map. You look up Crown Estate foreshore map, and it will tell you where you can metal detect and fly your drones
from. Really, really good point, Rob Taylor, and thank you so much for bringing that up. Because, and I will link this in the chat after this show, because you have this, which is the Crown Estate foreshore and estuary map, and this basically shows their ownership, because it's actually also quite useful. The reason I'm zooming in on this part of the world, it's easier to find the spots, but you can see all these little places here that is owned by the Crown, and therefore you can take off from here. And you will often find locations, as is being suggested there on the text at the front, that it is that you can take it off outside of National Trust land policies, etc., and jurisdiction. So even along the River Thames and that type of thing, it's it's a fantastic map that I haven't used in quite a while, actually, mainly because the sub 250 thing just gives us so much freedom. But actually, it is a really, really good thing, and I will link that in the chat. And thank you for bringing that up, Rob, because it's a really, really good point. And I've used that a lot over the years, hence I was able to find it so quickly. But just Google foreshore map, and it will come up as well, basically. We have a look here, Phantom and the drone. So we can't use the Oxford Dictionary definition of a takeoff and landing of an aircraft then. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And actually, next time we have Richard on, we will go down that rabbit hole if he wants us to, Phantom and the drone, because definition is something that is a mess in the drone space right now. And in terms of interpretation of definition, it's a mess. And, you know, legislation, drone code, AMC, GMC, operational authorizations, caps, everything else like that. If you could actually, and one day it will happen when Graham makes his huge map. And I don't know if you've seen these sci-fi programs. Okay, when you go into someone's cell and they're going to someone's cell, that some mad scientist that's been there for 20 years, and they've got all these scrawlings across their walls and everything else like that. Now I know that's Graham's garage, frankly, and one day he will release his map of drone absurdity.
If anybody can send me balls of different coloured string, I can never get enough.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yes, indeed, and I get your point completely. But it is one of the areas, one of the issues, basically, in terms of drone use at the moment, that I think needs a lot of focus, shall we say? But yes, sorry, my chat keeps failing here. Press that. There we go.
The most fun you can have is wait for the CIA to issue a document when they've just changed one of their own 3-letter acronyms and find them not using it.
Yes, exactly.
Minutes of fun.
Yes. What if you take off from public land and then walk back into their private land and wander about? Love a grey area, me. And I know with the laughy faces, you're having a laugh with that anyway. But yeah, you are then operating on their land again, and so you are then doing something on their land that they don't want you to do.
They don't want it to do.
Where the drone takes off from doesn't really matter. It's where is the operation starting and continuing from. And I know you're doing a minutiae thing there to for comedy purposes as well. So I'm not picking on you, but yes, that would actually then, because I have had that question put to us many times over the years, and absolutely you are going back across their land, and you are now because that's what it is. There isn't a law that it suddenly triggers in terms of, apart from their bylaw, apart from in terms of flying from National Trust land. You are going against what that landowner wants you to do, so they have legal rights over that. So Alan in Kent says, I asked staff at Foxton Locks if I can fly my drone over the locks, and was told not really, as it may distract the boat operators from doing their lock procedures. When I did fly, they did not know
I love this one. I saw this one come up, and I love it because I'm a Market Harbour boy, so I know Foxton Locks extremely well. Hours of fun down at the locks.
And do you see a Mini 4 flying at 200 feet, something that would have put the boat operators in significant distraction?
No, we used to see A10s flying over straight in the local prison.
Very nice.
Gartry.
Crap. That's a very niche mention for anybody who's locally, of course. So yes, and yes, somebody else is answering him on that particular topic as well. So I will go back through the comments, and our next video, we've actually got a recorded video coming up on this topic at the end of January. It's scheduled for that, which means it'll probably be out sometime in June. It's something that we will obviously talk about from the point of view of some of the advice, but also some of the bits and pieces that we're getting back from others, such as FPV UK, and bits and bobs I'm getting back from Richard as well, so that we can cover off all of the points. There will be that definitive guide, but I wanted to put this out because this advice on the website had changed, and because it's a topic that people raise with me an awful lot in terms of what can you do, what can't you do in terms of that. But also I wanted to put my voice in there in terms of how we all treat each other in the drone industry.
The respect thing, isn't it? Yeah. And it turns up endlessly in the Facebook groups, which I inhabit.
Yes.
It is questioned endlessly, which is fine. And actually, it'd be good if people do question it again, because it's changed a bit. We can point to this video and say, here you go, here's a comprehensive.
Here's one for us to have an argument about. So, is insurance required for YouTube? It's slightly off topic of the National Trust, but I understand it because you could be flying National Trust for YouTube. If monetized, I don't believe so, but curious on your take. My position, very simply, without all of my Sean caveats, which I'm sure I'll then follow up with, is you do not need insurance to post footage on a YouTube channel in the UK that is monetized. I'm not talking about the US, I'm saying the UK.
Oh, mine is.
Go on.
Having spoken very, very recently with one of the insurers who tend to cover this.
Hang on, we've lost Graham. Go on, please.
Is that you do. And so you may, depending on which insurer you're with, and I'm not going to tell you which insurer I was talking to.
However, if you don't have the insurance, they've obviously got no power or control over you anyway.
If you've got no insurance, no, absolutely, yeah, you have no insurance, but then, yeah.
Yeah. So I would argue I don't mind what an insurer thinks of an insurer thinking I need insurance something. Would remind me of comedy sketches of people selling someone in Surrey volcano insurance.
Yeah, but I think right. Okay, I think the answer is we need case law.
Yes.
My reading, and I am anal about this stuff, is that you need 785 2004 insurance if you're not flying for sport or recreation.
If you are flying outside of the description of that in legislation.
Yes,
so you've actually got and there is, I can't remember the actual wording, but there is specific wording, and you have to be flying outside of the interpretation of that wording. Basically, I just want to make that clear for anybody that then sends me 57 emails to say, "Oh, you got this wrong." But yes,
and one of the great things of Sean having me on is he doesn't mind when we disagree.
No,
so
I prefer it.
He loves it.
Yes,
he loves it.
I prefer it. Yes.
So we have a disagreement there. And I don't care.
Indeed. Well,
I just don't.
The fact that you don't care about being wrong is wonderful. I think it just shows what a great person you are and why I love you so much, frankly. Now, in my opinion, you do not need it. And this is because in terms of the CAA's guidance that I have in writing that stated that if there is not a contract in place, you do not need it, basically.
I think.
And I know at least one person who's been on this channel before who is screaming at the camera right now, probably, but I won't name them.
Well, my view on that is I know what your view on CAA's guidance is in a lot of cases, and you can't cherry pick.
Yeah, but I can use that email in a court of law. This is one of the things, though. This is a really good.
We haven't got the case law.
No, we don't. But do we need it? Do we need it? We now have a risk-based system in place, and it's fantastic. So it's not you have to do certain things if you're flying commercially or certain things if you're flying as a hobbyist. Everybody flies, it's essentially with the same risk profile from the point of view, the riskier the flight, the more certification you need, and the more qualification and everything else like that, and authorization, etc. I like that system. Where and of course this is a minutiae argument that me and Graham never get to have on air very much anymore, because we like something called viewers that watch our videos and don't want to watch two old guys arguing about.
They're overrated.
They don't want to argue about a tiny piece of legislation that nobody actually cares about. But hey, I'm bored.
This viewer does. This viewer does.
Yes,
want
exactly. Thank you. I am bored. But to me, this is part of the absurdity of it, because it makes no difference if that person flying was insured because they're going to put it on YouTube. It doesn't matter. And to me, that becomes that line that they have in the States, where if it's the furtherance of a business, you must be Part 107. And it's literally if you are doing a flight for a charity, but that charity is still technically a business, then you must be Part 107. It's
Yeah.
there is nothing, there is no safety aspect that is changing the parameters or changing anything about that flight, basically. But yes, so in terms of my personal hardline,
client pressure,
well,
got to get the shot.
but that's not what this is. Yes, I agree. We agree, because that's not what this is. YouTube is not pressuring me to get any kind of shot whatsoever, and YouTube is the client in this sense, because it is perfectly legal to fly your drone as a hobbyist, and then the following day sit down and cut those clips up and then put them on YouTube.
I'm not saying that my interpretation of the law is correct, and I'm not saying it's sensible. I think the law itself is not sensible.
I agree, and actually part of the new changes that are coming, I think, is going to try, possibly fail, and put a line in the sand on this. The only problem it's a bit like we had Callum Holland on from the CAA, who very generously gave us so much time over a Christmas, 2 Christmases ago, to do videos. And you go back and watch the videos, they're from his house. He literally gave his free time up for those videos. And he talked in the A2CFC thing in terms of, we were asking questions to him from the audience of, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? And the problem is that if you get too finite of exactly what you can do, if there are no gray areas and they spell everything out to you, then that's all you can do. You can't do other things and just apply common sense, basically. And it's an interesting one. But thank you, I'm Boardits, for bringing up the
thank you
bringing up the discourse at the end of
we got away with it.
Exactly. And actually Dan the Drone Man's put his 2-bit in there as well, just after that, not after we've spoken. So insurance is required when working in a commercial context. This is not a one-to-one relationship with income. You can work commercially for no money at all. Essentially, you need to be insured. Now, that is really good common sense. Would you not agree?
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
Legislation aside,
my advice would be go and get insured.
Yeah, legislation aside, everything else. If there was a couple of lines of guidance you were going to follow, in terms of commercial insurance, that's it. So thank you, Dan the Drone Man, and I'm very happy that you're one of our channel members.
We love that.
Yes, we are now trademarking that as Geeksvana guidance. So we appreciate that. So there we go. That is basically our thoughts and process behind the National Trust side of things, and trying to just really trying to dispel some of the rumours, some of the folklore that starts to form online, etc., and that type of thing, in terms of, it feels like we're trying to paint a narrative as a community that they've just got no control or power whatsoever over their land or whatever else happens. And just because you can legally fly over a piece of land that somebody else owns, that's it. It's more complicated than that. And you need to operate, in my opinion, in as responsible way as possible to protect the hobby. Yes. Yeah, protect the hobby, and therefore protect the industry, and therefore protect drone use in the UK, full stop. That's just my 3 pence worth, but that I've been consistent with that position for a number of years. Okay, so I'm going to give Graham the last word after I say Sean out, and then we're going to go off and have a right old row about commercial drone insurance.
And it's bizarre, isn't it? I mean, how can it be that that we can have a discussion for an hour and a half about drone regulations, and that's my way of decompressing for the week? But here we go. Last word.
Hold on. DJ Media. I'm pressing it in the wrong one. YouTube Partner Program does, however, have a contract, but that contract is not for drone flights. The contract I'm talking about is a contract for you to go and fly. So, YouTube basically calls me up and says, Sean, you are a droning god. All these amazing people like Dan the Drone Man and Paul from Steel City Drone Pilot, who are awesome drone pilots. We don't want them. We want you with your failing eyesight and poor health and dodgy mobility to wobble down that lane and get us a photo of that river, please, because you're the man. Now that would be, and they'll put it in writing, that would be a contract of drone use. A contract for me doing something else, in my opinion, in this situation, is not there, basically. So yes.
Geeksvana does not give legal advice.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Okay, excellent. So thank you everybody for coming along. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to say Sean out, and then I'm going to give Graham the last word.
Which is an appropriate one. Get off my land.
Oh, very good. I don't know these before he does them. It's not the last word now. I'll shut up.